Welcome to the Exponential Edge podcast with your host, Arya Salur. I'm excited to have you join me on this journey exploring the forefront of technological advancements and innovation that will shape our future. As a senior at Acton Boxborough Regional High School and the CEO of SecArmor, a cybersecurity startup, I'm fascinated by the transformative power of technology and its parallels with business. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into key areas that are poised for exponential growth in the next decade. We'll explore realms such as cybersecurity, generative AI, sustainability and climate tech, biotech and human longevity, and the reshoring of manufacturing. We'll also go over rising startups disrupting the marketplace. These topics and businesses hold immense potential to revolutionize our world and redefine the way we live, work, and interact. Each episode will feature insightful conversations with experts, thought leaders, and visionaries who are at the forefront of these fields. In just 30 minutes, our goal is to provide you with 5 signature nuggets of wisdom from our guests. These key takeaways will empower you with knowledge and help you stay ahead in an ever-evolving technological landscape. Without further ado, let's introduce our guest for this week. Hi, everyone. Our guest today is Andrea Wolfe, CEO of Mass Insight. Hi, Andrea. How's it going?
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thanks so much for joining us today. So, initially, before we get started, would you be able to give us a small, brief overview of your entire career thus far? I know you grew up in Bolivia and then ended up going to the University of Notre Dame, which is obviously a big transition. So if you could walk us through that and give us a better understanding of just how big that transition was, that would be great.
Of course. Yes. I'm happy to share. I think my personal journey also explains a lot of what the why behind my career choices.
Yep.
So really excited to share about that. As you've noticed, I grew up in Bolivia, small landlocked country in South America. And really early in my childhood, began to hear about all these wonderful stories about America, right? A lot of what we know immigrants come with, this belief that America is a land of opportunity, better education for children, better jobs. And in Latin America, at a time it was being plagued by a lot of political turmoil, it was often a place where people were seeking to escape to. I got to come to the U.S. as a teenager, so I definitely am one of those folks who's got a chapter of my life in Bolivia and then this next chapter of my life in the U.S. And as you can imagine, when I came here, I kind of expected that narrative to be true, right? Like schools would be better, it would be easier for families like us, and in some ways, I was a little bit shielded of that. I got to, get accepted, enrolled in the University of Notre Dame. I would say the biggest shocker to me was the winter, Arya. Definitely not used to the snow. But
So you moved directly to Indiana?
No. So that's Chicagoland first, and then South Bend, Indiana for
definitely
college.
is a huge climate difference in Chicago.
Yes, I mean that helped a bit, right? Like not that far. And I think what I will highlight though about my time at Notre Dame is this was the time in which I was really challenged with this belief that things were better in the U.S., in particular around education. So it was my senior year, and I was a pre-med on the pre-med track. But my senior year, I got to do some tutoring with Southside Chicago students, high schoolers from a variety of high schools. So not just one classroom or one teacher, but multiple schools. And I was really shocked to learn that students needed help with math in what I would consider some basic foundational algebra, right? Like not what you should be learning as a senior or junior in high school. And what was especially frustrating to me is that it's clearly not a student challenge, right? Like, it's not like it was like, oh, one student is behind, or the challenge of like one group of students because that particular teacher may have been new and didn't quite know the content. But it was a trend I saw time and time again. And so it was in that moment where I decided, you know what, I want to kind of know what's happening in the education space. I did a total 180, decided to become a teacher. And because I had not gone to school for education, I applied to an alternative certification teaching program. Most people these days know of TFA. That's the type of program. I looked into TFA and I joined a similar program through TNTP. And I really, really wanted to work with students who were like me, had come into the country. Many were English learners. And TNTP had a program in Austin. So I moved to Austin, Texas, became a teacher, was certified in the middle grades. And in my first year, had a fourth grade classroom of these amazing fourth graders who a lot of them didn't know English. And so
Oh,
it
wow.
was one of the hardest but most fulfilling opportunities for me. It was also one of the moments in my life where I knew like this was a proof point to tell us that time and time again, students can learn, students can rise to the expectations that we have for them with the right supports. And so that kind of jump started my career in education. I taught for a few more years, moved back to Chicago to be closer to family, and actually got an opportunity to work with a program with Chicago Public Schools, where we brought in and trained hundreds of diverse teachers to work in some of Chicago's highest needs schools. That was also incredibly fulfilling in a different way, right? Supporting educators.
Yep.
Then sort of like in this route to keep increasing my impact, did a lot of work with CNTP, this national organization around teacher effectiveness. And right around 2012, so about 12 years ago now, an old colleague recruited me to this organization in Massachusetts called Mass Insight. And she said, you should come work with us. We're doing amazing work all the way from the student level, teacher level, school level, all the way to the state house working with policy. And so that brought me to Massachusetts 12 years ago now. I had a chance to lead our national school improvement work. And then 4 years ago, I left for the opportunity to start join and launch a new nonprofit in the post-secondary space. So really from a desire to, one, see what it takes to build an organization, grow an organization, and also kind of understand what happens with our graduates after they leave high school.
Yeah.
And that was an incredible opportunity where we were building new pathways for students to get into a thriving wage job in less than a year, while also giving them college credits. And about a year ago, there was an opportunity for me to apply to the CEO role here at Mass Insight, a chance to come back. And I put my name in the hat, and here I am.
Yep. Congratulations on that. I know it's been about 8 months, right?
Yeah, officially, I went through the interview process starting in January of last year. And the announcement was made at the end of April, and I had a little bit of an overlap with the outgoing incredible CEO. And I was very fortunate to have about 2 months to kind of, get all the relationships passed on, all the knowledge transferred. So yeah, I was very fortunate about that.
That's great. And one thing I wanted to note is that in a lot of my past podcasts, actually, whether it be CEOs or just leaders in their companies, a lot of these people who I've interviewed have also worked for multiple years in a different country or grew up in a different country. So that's just a
That's
parallel.
really cool. Yeah, I wonder what's an underlying driver there. That's really cool.
I think it has to do with just being able to connect with people who come from different places and being able to see into windows into many different people's perspectives.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I
that's
mean,
something.
for me, definitely, as I shared, kind of coming here, my story reflecting on assumptions is totally made me swap what I was thinking about doing. Right? Yeah.
Yep. Yep. So another thing that you've done is be a part of the Pahara Fellowship, right? So briefly, could you just go over what the Pahara Fellowship is and your role in it?
Yes, yes. So the Pahara Fellowship, it's a really wonderful opportunity that is focused on strengthening and sustaining a diverse community of what they call outstanding values-driven leaders,
Mm-hmm.
who kind of have made it their mission to transform public education.
Yep.
And so I had heard about these incredible leaders I look up to being a part of the fellowship, and in 2019, I was nominated to be a part of it, and I went through their selection process and got invited to be a part of the fellowship, which was an incredible honor. And the end of 2019, 2020, you'll imagine those were the few months right before the pandemic hit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and this fellowship brings together leaders from across the country. My cohort in particular, we were 20 from all over the U.S. Working in a variety of organizations, some foundations, some organizations like Mass Insight, others were school leaders, superintendents, for example. And what was especially incredible about my particular cohort is that we got to meet in person January 2020. That was the first time they brought us
Yeah.
together. We did a week-long retreat. And then a few months later, the world shut down, right, in March. And education organizations, schools across the country were really kind of scrambling with, like, how do we pivot to online learning? What are we doing? What's going to happen with this pandemic? And this particular cohort, they have become some of my best friends. It has been an incredible source of support, not just personally, professionally as well.
Awesome.
To this day, some of the folks that I reach out to first when something's happening in my life, I'll reach out to them. And they've supported my own professional journey as well, right? Like the motivation, encouragement, the tips and coaching when I even applied to the CEO role. And I think what's really cool is that it's a true mix of identities, experiences, different perspectives, that with the goal of really pushing each other on how we can continue to make education better for everybody and every single child in the country.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's really awesome how you're able to find that support system, especially during COVID.
Yes.
Really came
Yes.
Mm-hmm. All right. So now let's talk about your current role at Mass Insights, right? So could you give our listeners an overview on what Mass Insights does, what the organization's charter is, and who your primary partners are?
Yeah.
And then I know that you guys have impacted thousands of schools and millions of students around the country. So
yes. I'm very fortunate to lead such an incredible organization. So a little bit of background and our mission. The organization is actually 25 plus years old. We're in year 27, and it's a national nonprofit. Our primary partners are state education agencies, districts, schools, and we work directly at the student level, at the teacher level, and at the leadership level as well. And our ultimate goal is to make sure that there is equity and excellence in K-12 education. We work nationally, although we've got a pretty big footprint here in Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that we sort of bring our mission to life is to these two sort of strands of work. The first is in advanced coursework. We really believe that all students, regardless of your background, should have access and be successful in advanced coursework in your secondary experience. And that can be either through advanced placement, AP, that could be early college, that could also be
Yeah.
dual enrollment. Like there's a variety of strategies. Massachusetts in particular has a long time history of being successful with advanced placement. Um, and in the STEM field in particular, we know that just taking one AP exam strongly has a positive impact on that student's ability to not only enroll in college, persist in college, but also their lifelong earnings, their wages, which is pretty incredible, right? Like just taking an exam. Um, and then the second strand of work is our national school improvement work. So this would be more of your typical consulting type of work. We will partner with a school, a district, who might be underperforming. When you look at the student outcome data, they might have student groups that are not doing as well as we know they can be as their peers. And so our team will work very closely on, doing a needs assessment, understanding what are the root causes, helping to put together a plan with those school leaders, and then implementing a variety of solutions depending on the core challenges. So yeah, those are the two kind of areas of work that we take on.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And I wanted to go through a case study of one of the different types of work you guys do. And you brought up the AP program, and why not? Let's go through that. Right?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. So in Massachusetts, we've been operating this AP STEM and English program now for 16 plus years. I think we're going to enter year 17. And every year we partner with around 90 schools across the entire Commonwealth and serve approximately 600 teachers and 10,000s of students. So it's phenomenal in its scale, its scope, and what we do. And we do a variety of things. So at the student level, we'll provide, we do this week-long summer bridge program at the start of the calendar year for students who, are like, oh, AP, what do I need to refresh on? What do I need to prep on? We also do extended learning for students during the school year, tutoring, mock exams. Like if you want to try out in a low risk way, what's that AP exam going to be like? We'll give that immediate feedback. We also provide supports to teachers who are in that AP, teaching an AP class through coaching, through professional learning. And then we provide supports to the schools directly themselves. So helping the schools think about their policies, like how do you determine what student can enroll in an AP program? How do you think about the resources they're going to need, and so forth. And I think what is super exciting is that for the third year in a row, Massachusetts has ranked first in the nation. So when you compare us against every other state, in the percentage of graduating high school seniors who've passed an AP exam. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
We also have some of the largest 10-year gains in AP participation for Black and Latino students. And, as we talked about, one of Mass Insight's focus areas is equity, making sure all of these opportunities are accessible for every student, not just students who are in private schools, not just students who have, backgrounds that have more means, but how do we make sure that AP is also offered for Black, Latino students who are low income? And then I think the last sort of really, really amazing data point I'll highlight, Aria, that makes me so proud. In the last couple of months, we've been looking at our data from the past school year. So that ended in June 2024. College Board sends us, we get to unpack and see how are the results. And we, in 2024, our students have exceeded their pre-pandemic outcomes by 32%. And so that's so incredible because you can imagine, you've seen all this data that we still haven't recovered in a lot of areas, right? But this is a really bright spot where we have the opposite positive
Yeah,
growth trend.
definitely. And it's great because I was in the process of taking APs this May, and I will be next May as well. So I've seen the cycle throughout my own school and some of the struggles that kids have had with studying and even finding out where to sign up for APs. Right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's
That's great.
awesome. I'm so glad you're taking AP courses and getting those credits, hopefully.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. So now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about, I feel, one of the most interesting things I've covered in my podcast, which is AI in education. I actually interviewed the CEO of an AI in education company, Anthology. His name was Bruce Dahlgren, a few podcast episodes ago. And I've also read a few chapters of, I don't know if you've heard about Sal Khan's book, Brave New Words. He covers AI and he calls it a genie in a bottle, right? So about to start scaling really, it's about to start growing in scale a lot over the next decade, the next few decades, where every person is either going to be literate in AI or illiterate in AI. And the people who are illiterate in AI are going to have a huge disadvantage in the workforce and in general life compared to the people who are literate in AI. So, that being said, education using AI and education on AI is going to start becoming very important. And like you probably know, when ChatGPT was unveiled a few months after it was, LA, New York, all these school systems started banning it in schools, thinking of it as an enemy, when in reality it could really be used to democratize learning and help these students with a sort of one-on-one teaching, right? Which obviously one teacher can't do that for an entire class. So I wanted to talk about AI in education and your insights and experience with the topic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, happy to. This is a great topic, Aria. And I think you're starting to see the education space also learning more about it, beginning to embrace it, and I think we're going to see a lot more solutions in the education space that actually leverage this. Yeah, I firmly believe that AI in education has so much promise for in multiple ways, right? I think at the student level, you kind of touched on this, but the ability to personalize learning. We know that a single teacher who might have, a caseload of 20, 22 students in front of them, when I think about my days as a teacher, I had a desire for I knew all the student needs. You try to be there for every single one, but there's not enough time of the day, and nor there were sufficient of me to go around and actually provide that really targeted support. And so I think the ability for AI to quickly analyze the strengths, the needs, learning preferences, pacing, right? And then adapt those lessons in real time is super, super exciting. And so I think that sort of like adaptive, personalized, real time enablement will be very cool. Kind of connected to that, one of the best practices that we know that really, really helps in classroom instruction is feedback and assessment for students, right? So quickly checking, like, did the student learn? How do I adjust? How do you do this in real time? And there can be a lag between it, right? Like, again, I'm going to put myself back in my teacher days, where I would do a quiz, and often it was paper pencil, and then I would take the night to check where all the students were at, and then it was the next day that I would like go back and give the students feedback and reteach. And now I think there's tech platforms that will AI will allow students to get that immediate feedback and learn so quickly. I think the last thing that I'm excited about, Aria, is actually less for students and more for teachers. Um, I cannot tell you how much of my day as a teacher, I also had to build in time for administrative tasks, right? Whether it
Yeah.
was like the grading of the assignments or tracking student progress, schedules, that kind of stuff. And so I think there's also an opportunity to line up a teacher's load so they're really focused on what matters most, right? Which is
Yeah.
actually the teacher student interaction on learning. Yeah, so for all those reasons, I think I'm a proponent. I also know that change isn't easy, and so we have to help people get excited about it. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And the first two things that you highlighted really help with something that AI can solve, which is the fixed classroom model that we see in schools today, which, like
Mm-hmm.
Salcott said in his book, every kid, when they take these unit tests, right, and over the years, they take hundreds of unit tests, right? Each of these unit tests, they're graded on like a letter grade or 100-point scale, right? So if you get a 90, that might be an A minus, you might be happy, right? But there's still 10% of material in that unit that that kid is not fully understanding and comprehending, right?
Yes. Yes.
So as we continue to take these unit tests and get 90s, 95s even, there's still a small percent of that material that we're not understanding that gets compounded over time. And like you said initially, with some of those kids who didn't even know basic mathematics, who couldn't perform those basic arithmetic tasks, this starts to become a huge problem later on in high school years. So
Mm-hmm.
those solutions that you gave, that AI can help with, can really solve this baseline problem in school systems. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
So the next topic I wanted to talk about in AI and education is the problem that many teachers find with it, which I covered before, the cheating aspect of it, right? So one thing that could help with this cheating aspect, because cheating is obviously very easy now with any AI language model, ChatGPT in particular, is the flipped classroom model, right? So in a regular classroom, you learn the material in class and you do the homework at home. And teachers are finding that students can just go home and type into ChatGPT their homework assignment, get the answer, copy paste, right? And they're not actually learning anything.
Mm-hmm.
So to combat that, some teachers have started implementing a flipped classroom model where the students do the homework in class, but they learn the material at home, and an AI tutor could really help with that teaching at home, right? And then the teacher can then help the student in the class with the homework, right? So I want to hear your thoughts on that and if you think that's a good solution or not.
Yeah, yeah. I really like this solution, Arya, and I would also encourage us to think about others in the same vein, in that it positions AI as a tool as opposed to um, the actual outcome, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so if we acknowledge that AI is truly a helpful tool for students to learn, right? And the flipped classroom approach does that. It says like, yes, go use, dig into a variety of videos, AI solutions to help you internalize the content, then
Yep.
I think that's great, right? And then what it means is like, I think the student, it still means the student is reflecting on what
Mm-hmm.
did I learn, sort of internalizing it so that we apply it. We asked for that application in another context. And so I think that's what's a great idea about it. A potential limitation of it, Arya, that I often think about, right, is there's still a lot of households that don't have a lot of
Mm-hmm.
Wi-Fi connectivity and resources. And so how do you make sure all students can truly
Yeah.
leverage AI assistance at home would be like the thing to solve for in that approach.
And I
Um,
know, I mean, our school does one-to-one Chromebooks, which
oh,
means
that's
that
great.
throughout your 4 years in high school, we have one Chromebook that we can use at home. We bring to school, and that still is a problem in that situation as well. So,
Yeah,
mhm.
yeah.
Yep.
So we need to like solve for that. But in
Mhm.
general, I think that's absolutely right. Like how another approach could be, right? Like assign like more oral presentations, right? Again, it's
Mhm.
more about like what are we asking students to internalize? How do they use AI as a tool? Rather than like, here's your essay, go home, bring back this essay that is very clearly where I think there's original concerns about cheating come with, like, oh, somebody just copied pasted here. Um, but yeah,
Mhm. Awesome. Thanks for giving your insights on that. And now let's talk about you as a leader, right? So you said you've been the CEO of Mass Insights for around a year,
six
months, a few
months.
months now.
Yeah,
Yeah, 6 months
6
now.
months.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
No, you're
So,
good. You're good.
mhm. So I wanted to ask you what your 1 year goals are for the company.
Yeah, yeah. Well, as you can imagine, when I first kind of stepped into the role, I kind of outlined what I call like a little bit of a getting to know the context period. So both
Mhm.
the onboarding I did with the CEO who was outgoing, getting to know new relationships, getting to know our new team members, right? So even though I had been part of the organization several years back, building relationships with folks.
Mhm.
It was through that phase that I also had an opportunity to talk with a variety of folks outside of Mass Insight, other leaders across the country, both on, what have been your experiences with Mass Insight? What do you see as the opportunities for us? And so for me, all of that kind of synthesis helped shape that we have an opportunity in front of us at Mass Insight to really do a couple of things. This moment in time that the country is at, right? We're kind of post pandemic. We're realizing that student learning is still not where it wanted to be. And we're getting so much data and feedback from colleges, employers that tell us high schoolers aren't ready yet for what comes next. Some of which I got to see in my previous job.
Mhm.
So there's this challenge at the sort of like end of high school. Like, are students really ready for what's next? And we're also getting so much data around incoming eighth graders that they are also not where they need to be to truly be successful in high school. And so, as I think about Mass Insight's mission and where I want to take the organization in the next year, we're really starting to lean into how can we help solve those two challenges. We've
Mhm.
got so much experience with our AP work in high schools, with our school improvement work. I think there's a lot more we could bring to the table to really make sure all students are graduating ready for whether it's high school or whether it's the job career that they pursue next. So there's a little bit of internal work around the new direction, the programmatic direction, and the solutions we're bringing to the table.
Mhm.
Kind of really, really honing in the secondary space.
Yep. Awesome. Now, talking about your leadership role in the company, I know you're a little bit new to it, but I wanted to ask you. I ask a lot of my guests about the mindset of a leader, the mindset of a CEO. Could you give us maybe 3 to 4 attributes or mindset, um, like mindset things that are instrumental for a leader to have?
Yeah, yeah. This is a great question, Aria. Kind of building off of the last question, one of the things that comes to mind to me is the ability for a leader to really help paint the picture of where the organization is heading, right? And for a nonprofit like ours, It's not just what's our mission, where are we heading, but how does that connect back to our mission, right? So if we're about making sure all students succeed at the end of the day, how do we truly bring that to life and not just make it be like a nice sign on the wall or something like that? And I say that because it's really easy for in your day to day to be so absorbed by your daily tasks, right? Like I've got this meeting, I've got this Zoom call, that sometimes you need somebody who's going to constantly remind the full team, like where are we heading, big picture, is what you're doing tomorrow, next week, helping to build towards that. So I would say that's one. I think the next thing I'll name is about empathy and listening. So let's acknowledge we're humans. We don't always have all of the answers. And for organizations like Mass Insight that are so human-centered, right? We're working with students, we're working with teachers. We really need to understand what is that human experience as a partners that we're working with. Listen to their challenges, what they've tried, and really take that into account in the solutions that we bring to the table. And that's internal too, right? Like goes back to me working with my team and collectively moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
The last thing I'll name, Arya, is around adaptability and resilience.
Mm-hmm.
You've probably seen on social media all of these, like, we've been living unprecedented times since 2020. Everything's unprecedented. It feels like we're in a really sort of changing environment. And so I think it does require organizational leaders to constantly be taking stock of what's the change in front of us, how do we respond, and how do we prepare, right? I'll give you a specific example right now. Every time there is a change in the federal administration, that has a change on education in organizations like ours, because we're going to go through a new administration. They're going to bring in a new Department of Education secretary. They're going to have a whole other set of priorities. And so kind of the rest of us are like, okay, how do we, how does our mission align to that, fit in, respond, and so forth?
Yep. And that last one actually brings us full circle back to the beginning of our conversation, how we talked about leaders and strong, successful business people having traveled, lived in other countries where they gain that adaptability and resourcefulness. So that's a nice ending to the podcast. And the last question I have for you that I ask to all of my podcast guests is, could you give us your 5 key takeaways for our entire conversation today?
Yes, absolutely. So I think I'll start off where we started today. I think people's personal whys and your own personal stories matter so much to what we do. And so I encourage you, Arya, as you embark on your next chapter, to not just think about career options, but also think about your personal story in connection to that.
Yeah.
That's one. I think the second thing I'll highlight is the importance of a sort of network of support. For me, we talked about the example of the Pahara experience that created that network for myself. It has mattered so much in my own leadership, in my in the work I'm doing at Mass Insight, and so I think I would elevate that and encourage everybody to make sure you have your own cheerleaders as well. And then this is cheating a little bit because I think it likely fits into 2. There's a lot more work to do in education. It's why I'm doing this work. It's why Mass Insight is focused on education. We know that it can be an equalizer. With a really strong education, we can change lives. And we know there's a lot to do, but there's a lot of really exciting solutions, organizations like Mass Insight. The promise that AI has to help us solve some of those, be more efficient, both at the student level, teacher level, I think it's an exciting time. So though it can feel insurmountable and some people may want to shy away from it, I think I would encourage everybody to say, no, we can do this. We can truly make sure all students get a quality education.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you for those. And thanks so much for joining us today on this episode of the Exponential Edge podcast. Thanks to our viewers for tuning in, and join us next time to hear about businesses, trends, and topics that are going to see exponential adoption in the future. Thanks, Andrea.
Thank you, Arya.